I'm just trying to decide if I'm comfortable even talking about that.
This one's wife. She cannot even open champagne. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. There are reasons why we have procedures and conventions and protocols, because they are an effective way of getting business done. It also ensures that standards are maintained, and standards are important. As I speak to you now, I have in my hands my copy of Debrett's Handbook. There you are, you can hear me knocking on it, which is the British-style correct form of modern manners. And within this, we have a range of things that it enables you to understand and deal with regard to doing things correctly. So it covers all manner of things. For instance, correct form of formal address with regard to the royal family and members of the peerage, dealing with academics, the armed forces. It explains hierarchies in relation to letters after the name, how you deal with invitations and seating plans and precedents and traditional rituals in relation to formal events, dress codes for formal and informal, rites of passage with regard to births, christenings, coming of age, engagements, weddings, for instance, getting started with the guest list, wedding invitations, the conventions after the wedding, social conventions on divorce, communicating the news of death, and then a large section on modern manners in terms of correspondence, social graces, table manners at home, public manners, and so forth. For instance, if you're writing to the Queen, unless you're personally known to the sovereign, any letter to the Queen should be addressed to the private secretary to Her Majesty the Queen. There is no need to address the private secretary by name, but if there is subsequent correspondence, this should be addressed to the actual writer of the reply. Furthermore, if you're dealing with a duke, for instance, there are differing ways that you ought to address the duke. So, for instance, if you are dealing with that duke in circumstances whereby it is formal, then in those situations, what you would end up doing is that you would make reference to the Duke as my Lord Duke, so that it shows that particular type of respect that ought to take place. And that when you're dealing with the Duke and writing on an envelope, you would refer to him as His Grace the Duke of Mayfair. If you're being social rather than formal, the salutation would be Dear Duke rather than My Lord Duke. Verbal address is Your Grace or Duke. In conversation, you would refer to the Duke or the Duke of Mayfair. A Duchess would have the salutation Madam or Dear Madam. And on the envelope it would be Her Grace, the Duchess of Mayfair. You ought to know, for instance, that with drinks at the table, the two most basic kinds of glasses are tumblers for water or soft drinks and wine glasses. These should be on the right-hand side of a place setting and slightly above it, either grouped or lined up. It is usual, when serving both white and red wine, to provide a smaller glass for white and a larger for red. Special glasses. Champagne is usually served in flutes or narrow glasses. Shallow saucer-shaped glasses were traditional, but have now fallen out of favour. And so, good old Debrett's, the handbook here, provides you with an encyclopedic set of knowledge about all of these conventions. Now, some people might say, oh, stuff and nonsense, HG, but it's important to do things properly. And one thing we know about this one's wife, other than being a narcissist, is she often doesn't do things properly. Now, to be fair, there'll be certain conventions that many people wouldn't know about, and why would you expect this one's wife to know? Well, that's certainly the case. And it would be somewhat unfair to expect her to know certain things. because they are rather obscure. She may not even think to look them up. But in respect of other matters, she demonstrates that she holds herself out as a supposed expert, and yet isn't one. For instance, in her new cookery show, it's been commented upon repeatedly that she doesn't hold a knife correctly, that she doesn't use a chef's knife, she uses a paring knife repeatedly, and it's a wonder that she hasn't lost a fingertip so far, given her technique. For somebody that, one, claims to be such a good cook, and two, is showing people how to cut vegetables in a cookery show, she ought to get it right. But we know this about this one's wife because she's a fraud. She claims to be a brilliant writer, yet the product of her writing is abysmal. She claims to be a talented content creator, but the content that has been created is either a litany of whining or dull, uninteresting, beige content. She claims to have her pulse on matters of politics, but then invariably fails to appreciate that she ought not to be involved in politics because of the position that she holds, and that her attempts to be involved in politics have come to naught. She holds herself out as some kind of style guru, some fashion icon, and yet can't dress correctly. Her behaviours are such that she can't rein in her rampant need to be the centre of attention and follow conventions. Other narcissists can as part of their facade management, but she cannot. So what we have is a confluence between a woman who is probably the most prominent useless individual on the planet and somebody who simply doesn't know how to do things properly. And another aspect of her failure linked to her overexposed television programme is in respect of the fact that she doesn't know how to open champagne properly. You would imagine that this one's wife, being a grasping social climber, would naturally want to quaff, and has quaffed, quite a bit of champagne. One should imagine that those men that she purportedly has serviced may well have had the champagne flowing, that she has attended events, both in the world of celebrity and within the royal family, where the champagne was available. And whilst other people undoubtedly would have opened those champagne bottles, if you're going to portray yourself as the hostess with the mostess in a lifestyle programme, then ought you really have an eye on getting it right? You ought to do so, surely. But Rosamond Hall, who is the wine expert for the Independent newspaper, writes, "I'm forever fascinated by what people drink on television. I mean, what are the nondescript wines in the tiny bottles on the traitors? I have a hunch they're just being served dodgy train wine Pinot Grigio. TV and celebrities, quaffing, booze, definitely gets more interesting for me when I know what they are drinking, and I become something of an expert in working it out. When it comes to this one's wife, though, that's where my eagle wine eyes really come in handy. I can often tell by just the hint of a label what the wine is. And no, while my hidden powers won't go anywhere near towards solving world poverty, it does mean I can tell you exactly what the Duchess of Sussex has been serving up on her divisive new Netflix lifestyle series. Her show, unsurprisingly, is not receiving particularly dazzling critical reviews, that's putting it politely, and has been lambasted for its twee syrupness. I get it. It's never going to win awards. But as exports from America go, it's a lot better than the bilge coming out of the White House currently, writes this author. I couldn't help but be enamoured by the opening sequence, which features a beekeeper that reminds me of a cross between Shaggy from Scooby-Doo and Yogi Bear. He deserves his own spin-off, and despite what people say, it was currently top 10 48 countries worldwide. So while I'm not here to this one's wife bash, though yes, the gloss is definitely a bit OTT, and honestly, I don't know one person who has the time to do any of the things she does. My child is lucky if he gets a sandwich cut in the shape of a dinosaur, let alone with flowers on top. I do think the debut series should have come with a health warning. Episode 2 is a tour de force in how not to open a bottle of champagne. Honestly, I screamed. I wanted to reach into my television, pull a duchess aside, and have a vital chat about safety in sparkling wines before someone loses an eye. Watching this one's wife casually remove the cage and then just potter about the kitchen, having a chat, plating up a frittata, all while she's essentially stood next to a loaded gun, that cork could have exploded out at any point and taken someone out. Remember, people, if you're opening champagne, Prosecco, Cava, or any sparkling wine that has a cage on it, that thing is there for a reason. The pressure inside a champagne bottle is much higher than the air pressure in a car tyre. It can fly out at speeds of up to 60 kilometers per hour. Get the cork out as soon as the cage comes off, please, or better still, use the cage as a little bit of extra grip to safely open the bottle and enjoy. Thus, this wine expert points out that this one's wife was dicing with potential injury to either herself or her guest in respect of how she opened this bottle of champagne. Now, there might be some people who think, oh, that's rather finicky, but it demonstrates again that this one's wife, who claims that she's got a freakish eye for detail, clearly doesn't have one, as we've seen with so many failures and mishaps. But once again, you're meant to be putting a program on that you've presumably had people consulting on. You've got individuals who you could speak to, sommeliers, wine experts, you could speak to the chefs, etc. We had the instance, I recall, of raw chicken being placed straight onto a shelf in a fridge, which contravenes all manner of health and safety. And here we have her not opening a bottle of champagne properly. It might be a minor thing, but this is another aspect of this one's wife. She gets so many things so wrong so often because she doesn't care, because she isn't the expert that she portrays herself to be. She is a fraud. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.